Okay, let's go ahead and get started, and a few more people might trickle in as we go along. So it's my pleasure to reintroduce Komal Thareja, who is a senior research software engineer at RENCI at UNC Chapel Hill. And she's going to be continuing her talk that she gave back in May on AI-powered development for research cyber infrastructure. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Komal.
Thank you, Nicole. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all here. Uh, I know I did this in May, so for anyone who is joining fresh, I will give a brief of what I talked before in part one and then take on from part two. And the idea here is to show how I've been using AI for some of the things I've been working on various projects. And I don't want intend to try and convince you that AI is magic, but I want to share what things have worked well for me and what doesn't and what might be useful for you. A quick reminder of Nikolai already mentioned, I am a software engineer at RENCI and I build infrastructure that researchers use. As I mentioned in part one, I work across three federally funded projects: Fabric Testbed, which is a nationwide programmable testbed, and Pegasus AI, where I'm trying to work on bringing AI to scientific workflow management, and Swarm, where we are trying to build workflow applications on resilient meta systems. All three of them will show up in the slides I talk about, so I just wanted to give you a brief heads up. So let me quickly re-anchor why this matters for Research CI specifically. This was the heart of part one, so I'll try to keep it short. Our world has unique shape, small teams, long-lived systems, heterogeneous stacks, and users who are themselves domain experts. So the pressure is real. The more ambitious the science we're supporting, more facilities we have to integrate, and we generally tend to have smaller teams. So AI tooling doesn't solve that on its own, but it changes the leverage each engineer has in a way that genuinely reshapes what we can take on today. So today I wanted to show you that leverage in action. If a part one had one thesis, this is it. This is a single liner I'm copying on over from part one, which says that AI is a force multiplier, not a replacement. It does not replace your judgment, your design taste, or domain knowledge. Those are still on you. What it does is remove the friction between an idea and a working code. Imagine like one afternoon you think of something. Earlier we would wait for weeks to implement it because it would take that much time. But now, if you want to prototype it, you can use one of these AI assistants and have it up and running in a couple of hours. So that is why the 10x claim is real, but it is a little bit uneven. Some of the tasks, it is very transformative, and for others, it doesn't add any value. So the skill and the thing that I want to emphasize here is learning when to lean on AI and when to ignore it, because there are cases where whatever it produces does not make sense. So everything in the subsequent slides is evidence for this one claim. Before I go ahead and talk about the new stuff, I just want to give a brief overview of what I covered in part one. Like I mentioned, I work on Fabric. So in part one, I showcased how we have used AI in Fabric. Fabric is a nationally funded test bed, and all of these test beds, we have a bunch of them. NSF has funded quite a few. All of these test beds, it's not easy to use for somebody who's new. Whichever test bed you go to, you have to learn um, whatever interface they're offering, how to deploy your stuff before you can actually get to your science. So there is a bit of a learning curve. So what we have done in that is use AI to build tools which reduce that learning curve. So users can basically, from their intent, they can directly get an experiment set up and directly get on with the science without spending time on learning how fabric works. So that is what I have worked on with fabric. We're trying to do something similar for Pegasus AI as well, trying to work on building a Pegasus Studio so people don't have to learn how to learn the nitty-gritty details of Pegasus, but rather they can focus on their science, but still get all the powerful things Pegasus offers and scale their experiments on research infrastructure that spans their campus, all the near resources or HPC resources. So all of that, in addition to all of that, I also talked about how you can build these skills which these AI assistant understands. You might have been hearing a lot of things about people having Claude skills or Codex skills. So that is what I spoke about last time. And the most important thing I think I talked about last time was this five-step loop I have, which is design what you want are trying to build, plan it, then implement it using the AI assistant. You as a human review it, and while you're doing all this, you have a strong test harness. So it's easy for you as a user to verify what AI built and does it make sense or not. So today what I'm going to show is I'll show three new use cases where I have used this. One of the use cases I think I did talk about last time, but my screen sharing didn't work. So I'm revisiting that. But then the other two are new. So one is the reporting dashboards, tutorial videos, and reproducing published science. And then step back to see what all of this changes for all of us. What might be useful if you would like to try it on your own as well. Lot of these, all of these projects we work as part of academia, which are funded by NSF or one of these institutions. We are required to report back results and show how whatever project we got funded for, how is it making an impact. And typical um, impact metric for a project could be like how many users you have or how many publications did you get. And often things like that get are not easy to find out. If you're just purely research, you're only talking about publications from your team, that's easy. But if you're a test bed and someone else is using it, it's hard. Not all the people go report back and say that they used Fabric to publish this paper. So in order to handle that, Paul Ruth, who is the PI for Fabric, he built a dashboard capturing all of that information um, using Claude, and then that looked pretty useful and powerful. And then we were talking to him and figuring out how someone else can leverage that. And then again, we use the same strategy. He had built a spec file, which is the design, which could be translated to other projects. As part of this spec, he also had an interview. When we wanted to apply that to other projects, what we did was we converted that spec into an interview questionnaire so that people who are trying to apply it to different projects, they can answer those questions, and AI using that spec file and answering answers to those questions can build that similar dashboard for their relevant projects. Before I show how I use that, I also want to mention that what this dashboard does is it uses things like Scopus and Semantic Scholar and OpenAlex to pull out all the publications all users which are on Fabric have published, reads their abstract, validates whether they have cited Fabric in it, and uh, and builds a dashboard like this. So this could be very useful if you're trying to write a report and send it back to NSF and show what the impact of your project. So instead of me doing all these things, all the work which Paul had already done, what I did was I asked him, could he share his spec file with me or the interview question form he had, and could I try it and apply it on two different projects and see what kind of outcome I would get. So what I did was I used his spec file and the interview markdown file, and I was able to build a similar dashboard for Pegasus, as well as for the other project like I'm working on is a Swarm. So I'll show that in a bit. But if you see here, I'm able to figure out how many publications there are. Some of these metrics you see here were also shared by Pegasus team because I didn't have access to that. So I also provided that information to the AI assistant along with the publications information. Um, so the idea being that these dashboards are easy to build if you have that spec file and an interview questionnaire. I did something similar for Swarm project, which is a purely research project. So no one else is using it. It is so in this case, it just extracted information for people within Swarm team and figured out where these how many publications have been made as part of this project and which conferences did we target, and it even was able to create plots for per team member. So this is quite useful. Why I'm showing all this is that I want to say that uh, earlier we used to say that the code is an artifact which you share with people. But now, if you have these specification files, which are just markdown files, which have plain text written in them, which can be easily understood by the AI assistant, they are actually a reproducible artifact. If you could share them with someone else, and if you build something, a tool which has a broader impact, someone else can use your spec file and build the same tool, limited or scoped to their experiment or project. So the second case study I want to show here is it's the same idea like I've applied on dashboards, but we built new systems like in the last version I show I mean in part one I showed you Loom AI, which was uh, Fabric's AI assisted interface for building experiments, and we've also built something similar for Pegasus called Pegasus Studio. And now that we have these two interfaces to share with people, uh, what we typically do is we would create videos, record ourselves, and share it with people. And if you think of it, all of these tutorial videos we create, it takes a lot of time and a lot of iterations because sometimes we forgot to click something, or sometimes there are gaps in what we are talking, and then it takes a lot of editing effort as well. So I was thinking, if instead of me doing this repeatedly and fixing it, and every time I change the interface, I will have to go back and do this again. Could I leverage AI for all of that? So what I did was I used specifically for this, I used Codex. I created a project and I described my intent um, in a README, in a spec file, and I follow this template wherein I have a spec file, I have a roadmap, and I have a markdown file called actions, wherein I describe what all this video needs to do and what kind of voiceover I want, and if there are for some of the things, if the pronunciations it does is weird, I do describe all of that there. And then I asked Codex, can you, this is the URL where the studio is accessible. Can you go use the studio and create me a tutorial video with that? It took a bunch of iterations for me, but I was able to plan multiple videos with it and build a tutorial video. It does definitely lack the human touch. And I am not saying that this replaces the human tutorials we do, because when you are doing this tutorial as a human, some there are you don't not only talk about what is the topic of the tutorial. Some of the times we also talk about our, no, our own knowledge and share extra things which AI can't know, because if we haven't described that, AI wouldn't know the extra domain knowledge a user as a human I have or someone else has, right? But if you were trying to just share small videos for or have a YouTube channel where you just want your users to know a specific thing they should learn, how can they use that specific thing? This is a very handy tool that can be used, because think of every iteration you release the new software, your interface has changed, and you don't have to do this again and again. You can just have your agent build this video for you, and all it has to do is push out that video again. I will, this is just 2-minute video, so I will show you what it looks like for my attempt for Pegasus AI. This may not be perfect, and this does not mean that this is the interface, but this is just an example.
Welcome to Pegasus AI Studio. This orientation shows the main workspace surfaces, from the dashboard to AI help, examples, workflow runs, and notebooks. We will start from the dashboard, open an AI workflow card, add Quick Start from the marketplace, inspect the completed run and DAG, then finish with resources and notebooks. The dashboard puts the main studio tasks in one place: AI-assisted workflow building, examples, run monitoring, resource usage, notebooks, chat, and terminal access. The AI cards help users get started without memorizing commands. For example, create a new workflow opens Pegasus AI chat with scaffold selected, so the user can type a prompt. Marketplace lists ready-made workflows from Pegasus Hub and Pegasus ISI. The Quick Start workflow is the fastest example for an end-to-end run. After adding Quick Start, Studio marks it as added and provides an Open in Workflows link. That link moves directly into the workflow dashboard. The Workflows page shows Quick Start as a project. Opening the project launches the Workflow Details view for configuration and execution. The Quick Start Details panel shows project files, execution site parameters, and the Generate Workflow action used to launch the workflow setup. Clicking Generate Workflow starts the launch sequence. Studio then exposes the plan, run, and DAG controls as the workflow assets become available. Wait for the workflow setup to finish. When plan, run, and DAG controls are available, the Quick Start project is ready for execution and monitoring. After Quick Start completes, the workflow shows a succeeded run. Opening run 0001 reveals the monitoring details for that execution. The run detail includes the job table. Here, each Quick Start job succeeded, with duration and exit code columns available for monitoring and debugging. The DAG view shows the workflow graph. Quick Start has hello and world jobs, with the legend showing states such as running, succeeded, failed, and held. The Resources tab shows pool capacity, idle CPUs, queued and held jobs, and available OS pool capacity, so users can understand resource usage while workflows run. If users prefer a notebook interface, the Notebooks link opens Jupyter Lab in the same workspace, where workflow folders and results can be inspected. That is the Studio path. Start from the dashboard, use AI help when useful, add an example, run it, monitor jobs, and continue in resources or notebooks.
I know this may sound, people who don't use Pegasus may sound, this may not be very useful, but the idea here was not to show what Pegasus can do, but the idea was that if you had something similar, you can build these tutorial videos in a matter of minutes rather than someone in your team spending hours. And every time you have an incremental update, all you have to do is call that agent, one your AI project and an agent to build this for you. It's easy. It's pretty easy once you have it set up. Now, the third use case I want to talk about is reproducing published science. This is the direct payoff for the Fabric and the Loom AI story I talked about in part one. So the question we were trying to ask was, can an AI coding assistant reproduce published science on Fabric? The intent behind doing that exercise was to see, could Fabric be used for reproducing papers? Could conferences use Fabric as a target to reproduce papers if they wanted to? So what I did as part of this was uh, not only me, like there are other collaborators, we all work together. We use Loom AI, and within Loom AI, we use Claude Code to Loom AI is the same environment I showed you last May. We followed a spec-driven approach wherein there were 4 phases. You assess the artifact available for a paper, write a spec file, adapt the code, and execute it on Fabric. And once you have all of that, you can verify the results against the paper. The key move is that we judge the reproduction at conclusion level, not at the metrics level, because some of the papers we picked, we did not have similar infrastructure for them. So instead of comparing whether we got similar exact quantified numeric numbers, we verified whether we could draw similar conclusions running the same experiment on fabric or not. The three domains we chose for this was with rising difficulty was like fabric native networking, which is BBR congestion control. The second one was um, molecular dynamics lamps, which does a study of training on GPUs. But since we don't have that many capable GPUs on Fabric, we tested this on the CPU only MPI cluster running on Fabric. And then the third use case was genomics pipeline. We did have the paper. We had some of the pieces of the paper, like some of the pieces of the paper, the code for some of the pieces was available. Rest of it was just described in the text. And the data set was also not completely publicly available. So I'll show what we found out. So this is the four-phased approach we took. We again had the spec-driven pattern from part one. We just applied it to science in this case. We assessed what artifacts were available. That means AI read the paper and the public artifacts. Public artifacts meaning if there were any data sets being used, or if there was any code available for that paper, or was it cited in the paper or not. And then based on that, AI created a spec file. As a human, we reviewed that spec file, and if we thought whether it was reasonable or not. And once we thought the spec file was reasonable, we asked AI to build the notebooks and the scripts. And in the third part, we ran all of that on Fabric. And at I'll be honest, to begin with, we started with actually getting similar results, like matching the quantified numbers on both the tests, but that was not happening because one, the hardware was different. Second, the lot of software dependencies which were used in the original papers was not same. And for some of the papers, we didn't have all the software pieces or the data sets available. So what we found, these are the conclusions based on that study across three domains. If like I'm also listing out how much. The intent was also to see how much it cost using Claude, how many tokens we burnt, and did it give us any improvements in worth if we compared it against somebody manually reproducing it themselves rather than using an AI assistant to do that. So if you look there, the effort is definitely reduced by a significant number. But the deeper lesson here is that um, the numbers, the results shifted with hardware. The only difference we noticed was that in this case, for example, for molecular dynamics case study, this was actually completely done on GPUs, and we didn't have similar GPUs on Fabric. So we ran tests on a CPU only MPI cluster, but we could get similar conclusions, but obviously not similar quantified numbers. And in the first case, we had a BBR networking example. I think, okay. In the first case, the BBR networking example, we had four papers. All four papers had their GitHub artifacts available, and some of them were even run on Fabric. So it was easy and they also had notebooks available. So reproducing them on Fabric was very easy for AI because it had everything except for basically in these four papers, we were comparing against different versions of BBR. BBR v1 was validated, and the results were matched what was published in the paper. But for BBR v2 and BBR v3, as described in the paper, they needed a kernel patch on the virtual machines. And that information or that artifact was not available as part of the user's artifact. We even tried pointing AI towards how it can patch it. patch the kernels and see if it can reproduce the same results. But after multiple iterations using this prompting and the spec-driven approach, it wasn't able to patch the kernels unless I manually gave a patch. So in this case, that is why if we talk about uh, AI assistant completely reproducing it, the results for BBR V2 and V3 were not completely reproduced. But this was a very close match with what Fabric needed to run experiments with. In this domain, like already said, the hardware didn't even match, but the users had a complete GitHub repository which had both the data sets and the code and the instructions on how you would run this. So we were easily able to reproduce this on Fabric and compare conclusions. And if you look at the I I think the major point to highlight here is not that I was able to reproduce something if the code is available. I think anybody can do that if we have the code and the data set available. But what does AI offer us by doing this? It helped in the sense that it reduced the amount of time you would take to manually do this, and if AI did it for you. Again, this is a similar use case, but the key highlighting factor for this use case was this was a genomics pipeline, and only bits of the pipeline were there was code available for only bits of the pipeline, and then the data set only a partial data set was available. So in this case, we attempted AI to read the prose described in the paper and build the code itself. It did do that, but the results were not did not okay. We did not have genomics pipeline background, so we reached out to the author of the paper, the original paper, and asked them to review what AI had. What the code AI built and the experiments it ran, and did it match with what it was showing, because it did not match on paper exactly. So based on original author's feedback, they said that could you redirect AI in this direction or maybe change the way that it is building this. We did that too. But even then, we only got like 75% success, in the sense based on if they were measuring 10 metrics, we were only able to reproduce 7 or 8 metrics. And some of them didn't match because the data set was missing, but some of them matched completely. The only pieces that matched completely were they had artifacts available for that. That is, the code was there, and the data set was available. So this the the key point here is that the AI can take away and do the tedious job for you, but if it doesn't have enough information about some certain domain, it would not be able to build it on its own and do things. So like I was saying, it is not magic. It can only do deterministic tasks well when it has enough context and enough information available. And for things where it lacks enough context or enough grounding, it will try to hallucinate, it will try to reproduce something or do something which does not make sense. This is another use case. In this case, what I did was we had a paper from ICRA wherein they were trying to analyze polar ice. And in this case, they didn't. I just had access to their paper. They also shared their code, which means they had some notebooks, and I was able to use that and use AI assistants to build Pegasus workflow first, and then reproduce the results, because they were also able to share the data sets. This was where everything was available. The context was clear for AI, where we could ground it with real things. It did really well. The results were like very comparable. We got authors' feedback too, so they also were very happy with the outcome. And there was only a difference of 5% between the results, and that too because some of the tests in their paper were using manual labeling of data, And we did not have access to that in the information provided by the author. But besides that, if you the key conclusion here is that if you're using AI assistant and if you're using the spec-driven approach, and if you're able to ground it with real data sets, real code, real examples, it does really well. So okay, I think I spoke before I came here, but this is what I was trying to show, that AI did really well, largely on its own, like reading a paper, generating a spec, or provisioning resources on Fabric, and reusing existing artifacts, or translating them, or debugging dependency, all those things. But on the right is where it needed human guidance. For example, for the pieces where it did not have enough context, like for genomics case, it kept building code on its own, but that didn't make sense unless the original author for the genomics pipeline intervened. So I want to come back and emphasize the same point I have been emphasizing from even in part one, wherein if you look at all the case studies I've presented today or in part one, the emphasis is on doing the spec-driven development, wherein your spec doesn't captures these four things. It captures the intent, that is what you are trying to build, and you describing the constraints and non-constraints up front. And then you ground it with real code, not only code, maybe documentation pointed to your API documentation. And if you have any skills built or in this case, if you have a paper, ground it in that. And then before you go ahead and build any code, interact with the AI. So arguing with AI for just the spec is easy because you're not using enough token, or you're not building something which you would discard later in order for you to have a very strong design. And once you have grounded it, also ask it to do things in phases, not in one shot, because if it does all the things together, it often tends to produce garbage. So if you do it in phased incremental development, it's easy for you to validate it, and it's easy for you to review it and give feedback, get it updated as well. And since the amount of code AI generates is kind of humongous now, and it's cheap, right? You're able to ask an AI assistant to build an entire application for you. But as a human, you can't review that much code. So having a test harness before you even ask it to build anything, test harness tests against your expected outcomes. So that way, if you're doing this iteratively, you have a way to validate that what it did matches your expectation. I think I just wanted to highlight here is that AI autonomy is bounded by workflow organization. What I mean is that if you have grounded it in the sense, in the previous slide I said, if you're provided your intent, grounded it with real examples, um, have a test harness, and if you are doing phase development, it can be very powerful. But on unknown or niche things, it doesn't really work well. But if you have all the things, all the artifacts available for what you're trying to reproduce, it does pretty decent job and takes away all the tedious job a human would have to do. I think I'm just trying to summarize what it is good at. Like on the code side, if you're trying to build some boilerplate or glue large scale refactors or API migrations or onboarding to an unfamiliar code, it's pretty good at. If you're trying to write beyond code, if you're trying to turn a paper into slide deck or draft progress reports, exploratory data analysis or dashboards, if you're trying to work on spreadsheets, things like that, it is pretty good at. Things you can easily validate. it can do the tedious job for you, and you as a human still control the outcome, because you have to still validate what it generated. You can't just blindly ship out what AI built for you. Again, I'll come back to where it falls down, like domain-specific protocols that are underrepresented on public web. I'll show an example for that, or subtle distributed system bugs, like races or partial failures or clock skews, architecture and trade-offs, where it picks something plausible that isn't necessarily right for your system. And the big one is that it generates the output so confidently that sometimes you start to judge your judgment as well. So you have to be very careful. You still hold the architecture and design and let it just do the tedious job for you. Um, um, a, this is an example, this is a deliberate example where I wanted to show you where it didn't work really well for me. I'm trying to learn how can quantum networking works, and it's a new thing. I do not know anything about it, other than what I've read a little bit about it. So I was trying to use AI and see if it can help me understand it better, and help me build an example so I can understand how it works end to end. So it in the beginning, when it was trying to explain me concepts, it was pretty good. But then the moment I started, it helped me build an example on Fabric wherein I have a bunch of nodes and I want to do quantum key distribution. Can you help me do that? So for the basic stuff, it kind of did okay. And I used, again, the spec-driven approach. And I was under the assumption that that approach would work well. But in this case, because it doesn't have enough information available, or it hasn't been trained enough on this subject area, it tends to do okay if you're asking very naive things like explain to me what how would quantum key distribution works, or what is a qubit, or what is an entanglement. But if you're trying it to ask to build software for you around that, it actually failed miserably. Like, even being a novice, I could tell that this line in the code was wrong. So the intent being that for whatever things, whatever domains, the training data isn't available, it doesn't do really well unless you ground it with real examples. So here are the patterns that have worked really well after having been doing this for quite some time now. Like, if you have small scoped tasks versus big vague ones, and if you give it context and point it to files, or if you're running into error, give it the specific error you're running into, or specify the constraints, very aggressively run the code, read the diff. Like, don't trust what it generate. Always verify what it has generated. Uh, Obviously, because the amount of code it generates is huge, so you can't really test review that much code. But maybe build AI agents which can review the code for you. Make the test harness cheap. So always keep humans in the loop. I think all the worry all of us have is that it's going to replace us. I don't think it's. This is just my opinion that it doesn't have intelligence to replace us yet. And the anti-patterns, the failure modes I keep seeing is that they're all the same story. Like, the model produces plausible output. The idea being, once it starts doing the right thing, uh, you one as a human can be lazy and stop reviewing it critically, and that can cause buggy software to be delivered or buggy outcomes to be shared with others. So please avoid that. I think I've been iteratively already saying that the challenge is, like, code reviews are a challenge. And if you want your AI assistants to work well with your software, or with your documentation or everything, you should think of uh, updating your documentation so that it is AI friendly. It's easy. Build AI assistants which can review code on your behalf. Have test harnesses which can test your pipeline. So those are the things we need to we need to work on in order to our projects or different areas in our projects to be AI friendly. What this changes for science, I think, is that the bigger unlock is the iteration speed on research code. So ideas don't have to be queued for week. If you have an idea, and if you know what you're trying to do, you know the entire design. It's easy for you to use an AI assistant to build it. Having a working prototype within hours or a day is completely possible, which until otherwise would have taken long time. Um, so the thing is, another thing I would also I've been doing it for my all the things I have been working on is that most of these AI assistants have a way wherein you can tell log my prompts or save my tokens. They have a memory. You can set it up to be infinite, or you can store it for last 30 days or 90 days, whichever works for you. But having that helps. Every time you're completing a session, have some indicators in your Claude.md or Codex agents.md saying that every time I log out, log my token usage, log my prompts, or log my responses, log or update the memory with my decisions. So that helps in case you want to go back and look. And some of the times, I mean, that is how I was able to get the metrics about how many tokens I have used as well. One of the practical concerns, of course, is the cost, because some of these, if you may all have used or have heard about Fable 5, which is the newest model launched by Anthropic. And in the beginning, for first few weeks, they said you will only have this available for this amount of weeks, and then you'll have to pay extra. I mean, now they have made it part of default model, but the token usage is very expensive. So it does add up. You have to figure out how to use these efficiently. I have tried some strategies. I will show you how I'm doing that. And another key another key concern is data and security. If you are using these frontier models, whatever you're typing or whatever file you're sharing, that data is definitely going out. So be cautious of what you share. If you are working on a project where data security is a concern, you don't want to use them. You rather want to use a self-hosted local LLM rather than using these frontier models. And whatever it generates is, again, if you're producing open source code, you are still obligated towards that. This is an example in order to see how I have been using. I found some open source tools which help me track. Like I use both Claude and Codex, and some self-hosted LLMs as well. So I wanted to see how much tokens I'm burning, how many dollars I have spent, worth of tokens I have spent doing all of this work. So this is somebody shared this with me. So I just have this deployed on my laptop, and it's easy enough to once in a while check how many tokens I have used. Another, this is what I was talking about. How can you control the cost? Because token burn, burn is a thing, because you don't want to you want to be efficient in whatever you kind of subscription you are using, right? So what I've been using earlier, I was just using Claude in the beginning when I started doing this. Then I have access to some of OpenAI credits through UNC Chapel Hill. So I wanted to see how could I leverage them, because as soon as you start using Fable, you burn through your tokens very quickly. So is there a way for me to organize these AI assistants in a way that they can delegate tasks between them without me switching context between them? So what I've done is at Claude level, I have given it access to my um, OpenAI access. Please remember, don't paste any secrets or passwords on the prompt. What I do is I create a file wherein I have that information, and I tell, use this file to access my Codex credits or OpenAI credits. I use the frontier model for Fable 5 or Opus to do more of the planning work and then delegate boilerplate work to use Codex because Codex does really well on coding kind of tasks, even presentations, it does really well. So you don't have, but Claude is better at doing planning or designing stuff. So you can delegate and efficiently use tokens. And in fact, if you wanted to work on something wherein you don't want to send your data out, what I've been doing is I'm running a local LLM on LM Studio, and I've told Claude that for this kind of task, always use my LM Studio instance and do not pass this information to Claude, to Anthropic, basically. So in that case, whatever is the LM Studio response, I just get that, and my data stays within the LM Studio running on my laptop. It doesn't leave anywhere. These are some of the things I would encourage you to try if you haven't been using any of these AI assistants. It's something fun to try and see how do they work well for you, or AI is not useful for you. I think this is like looking ahead where it is going. Right now, I think we're heading there wherein we would have longer running agents from these frontier models, agentic CI/CD, and then domain-aware research assistants. Like, for example, I showed you Loom AI, which is a fabric-aware assistant or a Pegasus-aware assistant. But we could also build similar assistants for different domains that could be useful for people working on those domains. The open question is, how do you verify this at scale? Like, how do we keep humans meaningfully in the loop when the output exceeds the review capacity? I mean, I do think we are at a point wherein AI is able to do quite a few things, and we also need to think of what should the newer generation learn when in the computer science. How does that change? I think these are the last two slides. I don't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to share if you have, this is a small tool which helps you if you're trying to control multiple different credits you have. For example, you have Azure credits or you have Anthropic credits, and you don't want to manage both of them. You can build a light LLM, use a light LLM in front and have single way for users to get tokens, but you can keep on adding multiple backends on the end. It could have Azure backend, it could have Google backend, or it could have OpenAI backend, but the users who are using these credits just get one token, and it's easier for you to add or remove backends. And again, this is another thing that I wanted to mention was I did talk about a lot of work I've been doing with these frontier models, but um of course there is a cost factor. We can't ship our keys for all the Fabric users, and not so what we are trying to in like what I've done as part of this exercise is that use these Claude and Codex to train a bunch of open weight models and figure out which open weight models work best for Fabric. For example, if I'm trying to build experiments on Fabric, can X model, I have a harness wherein which is running these tests against Fabric using different models, and it's comparing which model is best. And I'm trying to figure out which of the open weight models, if we deployed in production, could be best suited for our users, and then they don't have to get any credits. They can use our open weight models in the secure fashion. In that case, their data doesn't even leave Fabric. So they're not sharing anything with Anthropic or OpenAI. One last thing I would mention, and then I think then we can take questions, is OpenBrain. When you're using these multiple AI assistants, this is also an open source um, project I found, which I found very useful, was if I have a project which I was working on with Claude, it had the context of that project. But if I wanted to go and use Codex for that project, um, and still have that information or knowledge passed on to Codex, there is this concept of Open Brain, which has this database on Superbase, wherein you can send your thoughts from a project running the same project, which when running from Claude, it can send thoughts to OpenBrain. And when you're running, when after some time, let's say you chose to use Codex for the same project, you can launch Codex and say pull the thoughts from team from OpenBrain. That way, you can pass context between AI assistants without losing anything, and still have both of them work well. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, I would love to take them.
All right. Well, thank you again, Kamal, for that lovely talk.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, we'll see you. We have another webinar next week, so I'll be sending out an invite to that later today. Thank you, everyone.